Joining us on the line, we have Dr. Jomar Roberts. Dr. Roberts is a board-certified neurologist in the state of South Carolina, I believe, and potentially North Carolina, too. I could be wrong.
Yes.
He'll confirm that for us. He's also an author of a book, and he'll tell us a little bit more about that. But he has really has a passion for the study of traumatic brain injuries and the potential effects of cannabis as a medical resolution for brain injuries, especially relative to sports. Dr. Roberts, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show. You're with Joey, Joe, and Jason. Welcome.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good, guys. I practice in South Carolina, North Carolina.
Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you good. I got you, guys. How things going?
Okay, good.
Things are good. We want to get into the subject that you came to talk to us about, but before we get into that, we always have to ask our guests their affiliations, their sports affiliations, where they're from, all that stuff. We want to hear it. Right now, you're originally from Sumter, South Carolina, correct?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Born and raised, and now you're where are you now?
I'm living in the Charlotte area.
Okay. Who are your favorite sports teams?
Well, I'm a Green Bay fan, Joe. You know me for a long time. I'm a Green Bay fan.
Oh, yeah.
But I also cheer for the Saints.
Okay.
Got married into the Saints.
Yeah,
Okay.
he had no choice. He got married to the Who Dat Nation, so he's got two teams now.
That's how it works.
Now,
Go Saints.
yeah, he's always been not Giants, but a Green Bay fan forever. And I don't know how you become a Green Bay fan all the way down in South Carolina, but he's been with them. Who's your favorite football player of all time?
My favorite football player was Reggie White, man. He's a Christian like myself, and he played really strongly in the field. Put a can of whoop ass on everybody who he touched. So you know what I mean? That's what I like.
Now let me tell you about Jomar. I don't know if he does it now, but when we were back in school, Jomar used to play basketball with us every day. And he was so good that he would bring his special briefcase, the silver suitcase. I don't know what Jordans it was, but he used to bring
The 23s.
the 23s, the special editions in the briefcase.
Yeah.
Wow.
Take them out.
The handcuff on it?
Not the handcuff.
Yeah.
It should have been handcuffs on it, but he would take those out, play ball in them, and when he get done, he put them right back in the case.
Wow.
You dig.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what he would do.
That's
Now, I've been saying this.
did they work though?
Well,
Nah,
that's debatable.
they don't.
That's debatable. I'm gonna say that Jomar played a physical style of basketball. He had this thing with this mental intimidation thing,
Okay.
and you would come on the court.
I'm gonna guess he's below 5'10" then.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
5'9".
about there.
I'm 5'9".
Yeah. Those guys, they bring it. They're physical.
Things like you call a foul,
Yeah.
and he says no, that wasn't a foul, so you don't get the ball. Like things like that would happen. Like no,
Yes, sir.
yeah.
No, the shorter guys, they tend to get a little bit more physical.
Yeah, very,
Got to.
They
very
have
physical.
To. They have to.
It's a mental battle,
Right.
kind of like Ron Artest. He did play some pretty good defense, and he had his moments when he would become angry. That's when you saw his best
Got
moments.
it. When the Hulk came out. Okay, Dr. Banner.
So anyhow,
Yes.
a good segue for us. I know I was surprised you didn't pick Brett Favre as your favorite player for Green Bay because the great Brett Favre. Nah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, Brett took a lot of hits, and he also took a lot of concussions and a lot of other
Yes.
things, and it kind of gives us a good segue to get into what you came here to talk about.
Absolutely.
You've been doing some research
Yes.
recently. Tell me about your research and then how it will affect people that play sports and anybody.
Well, before you even tell us about the research, I'm interested first to know what was the catalyst for your research. And also, if you can kind of give us like a broad summary, just a
I will.
15, 20-second broad summary of
I
what
will.
you're actually doing and what you anticipate is the outcome.
Okay. So, long story short, about 20 years ago in college, I started noticing that, obviously marijuana use and recreational marijuana use is pretty common. But there were schools of thought at that time that there was some utility for marijuana use in the nervous system and helping to improve nervous system health. And I thought it was kind of crazy because everything we've been told through the media was that marijuana damages your brain, which is the opposite of what most of the data started to show. So that's been about 20 years. I've been kind of looking at the research. I've been collecting papers. And what I did is about 10 years ago, I had a study bank of the most important papers that were published all over the world related to marijuana research. And specifically in my field of neurology, because marijuana affects the brain more than any other organ. I was particularly intrigued because I felt that if it does help the brain, I would like to know within my field what ways I could use it or help to guide people, even in their recreational usage, to help give them better neurologic health. Uh, and so the long short of it is that in the past 20 years, we've been told as Americans that there's no data or that the marijuana data is soft, and that's completely not true. All over the world, and specifically in places like Israel and Germany, they have been looking at cannabinoids and their effect and how they work in the body for several years.
Very interesting because the leagues are trying to avoid. They're trying to avoid it at the same time where they have players who are endangered.
Yes.
All right, NFL especially when you're talking about players suing you now for their exposure to brain injuries, and you could possibly alleviate some of that liability on your end by offering or allowing marijuana use. There was one video that I saw on, I believe it was Bleacher Report roundtable, where it was 4 or 5 players,
NBA players, right?
NFL players.
NFL, okay.
Right, and these 4 or 5 NFL players were talking about their use of marijuana throughout their careers. So, of course, they were looking for the big got you title, and it said this guy smoked 2 blunts before every game. But it's much more in depth than that.
Yes.
They were talking about their use of it for pain relief and so far. And then the funny thing about it was how they all know when their test is.
Yes.
Once a year at OTA. So they all come in looking at the board to see whose day it is to get tested, because they're all waiting for that day, because once that day passes, it's on for 80% of the league.
The one dude said he would call the plug immediately. We'd be waiting for him at the house.
That's
and
smart.
he's good for the rest of the season.
Right.
So,
all right.
Okay.
All right, we're going to let you continue, and then we got a few questions for you. So go ahead and continue setting this up for us.
So I'm sorry about that. Let me wrap it up. And basically, what I found over 10 years of research is that marijuana actually is protective for the brain. And its most protection is in the acute setting after someone gets the initial injury. So these sports players, when they get concussions, any goes to an injury right away, the best benefit for their brain, therapy that I've studied, is marijuana. And so the NFL has to re-examine these, because what we're looking at now is that chronic traumatic encephalopathy, it develops after the first hit, the first concussion. And so cannabinoids protect the chemical cascade of events that happen the same way in every single person. They're all wired with those same receptors. And so what I found is that we need to start looking at whenever someone gets a concussion on the field, part of the concussion protocol needs to be some sort of cannabinoid that includes the THC. That's the stuff that gets you high. Can't really get away from that, because the data supports that it actually helps their brain. And yet down the road,
the disability from the chronic traumatic encephalopathy is devastating, right? Because we have suicide, we have cognitive deficits, and all these things can be mitigated by a simple plant called marijuana.
Okay. I have a couple of questions, and I'm sure everybody does.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
First question that I have is, first thing that you're warned about in terms of marijuana is it will deteriorate your brain cells.
That's false.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
kind of funny to me because I am a recreational user, and good to know that I'm not stupid because
Did you
I
smoke?
thought it was me.
Did you smoke the day you took that line drive off your head?
No.
You didn't.
No. But that's another
It would've been
interesting.
great.
That's another interesting story because as I've played sports my entire life
Yes.
at reasonably high levels, not professionally,
Gotcha.
and I know that I have suffered concussions.
Okay.
Right, and I also know that I have smoked marijuana for a long time, so it's kind of
Absolutely.
interesting trying to see where that balances out. All
Well,
right.
there was another study I wanted to just quote real quickly that came out of UCLA in 2014, and what they looked at was just basically anyone who had an injury, regardless of the mechanism, who came in and was marijuana positive or negative. Found in a large group of patients was that people who came in and had marijuana had better outcomes than people who did not
Wow.
with their brain. And so not only from that study, but from the other studies I was telling you about, that the way marijuana works, number one, neuroprotective. If someone has an acute injury, like you were saying, you sustain symptoms, if you are using marijuana chronically throughout these periods, you will have outcome with your brain health compared to athletes who do not use marijuana. And that is a fact. It's not, it's the data. And so even if our laws never change, our have to give them the opportunity to have long-term brain health after their professions.
Okay, Jason.
So I don't have a question, but I want to introduce you to my train of thought and kind of guide it to the right path. So for years I've heard that you cannot smoke marijuana in the realm of sports because it slows you down. So aside of the whole theory that it's killing brain cells, and so when I think in terms of NBA, when I think in terms of NFL, and really when younger players are first coming into these leagues, I feel that there's a level of maturity that even those players still need to have because they're coming into the league 18, 20, 21 years old. Like they still need a level of maturity on when to use it, when not to use it. Not everyone can perform the same way when it's being used and how much to use it. You know, you mentioned the benefits of marijuana use when you get injured and how when you get injured, it's best to use it right away because of the mental benefits. And, you know, I'm not going to try to regurgitate everything you said, but I think I'm on the right path. Can you just explain a little bit more, like, in that regard, like, you know, younger people coming into the league, using it, what it really does based on performance? Thank you.
Yeah. And so they looked at cognitive performance, you know, like processing speed, reasoning, taking ability, all the domains that relate to performance, both acutely intoxicated with marijuana and then someone who has never used marijuana. And what they found was tested, there were no significant differences in their performance cognitively, physically, when they were using marijuana or someone who never used marijuana. And so intoxication does cause people to have less coordination and that kind of stuff. But the thing I would post, you wouldn't get drunk and go play basketball, would you?
No.
Okay. And I'm not advocating that smoke a joint, get high, and go play sports. What I'm saying is, after an acute injury like a concussion, you need marijuana if you want to maintain your brain health. And that's the only, my understand, you're absolutely right. behavior-wise, we need to make sure that we're whatever behaviors are needed to maintain the performance that we're needed to perform in that job. Correct?
Yep.
Right. So
After an injury, then you're talking about how do I preserve this person's brain? And right now in the NFL, we don't have a protocol other than brain rest, exercises, but no real therapeutics that can actually protect these guys' brains after they get injured. For injury, fine. After injury, you need those cannabinoids. And so I wouldn't advocate going to
Okay, I got you.
But I would advocate if you get a concussion or you get injury in that game, when they take you out, you need some cannabinoids.
When you go that little tent on the sideline, if you take that big hit,
tent with
just
the
have
smoke coming up,
just have some smoke coming out.
you just got to run the grill next to it.
Yeah.
So that it looks like a barbecue.
Hey, I ain't gonna get it, but I mean, they have methods that they can use that are not, noxious to others or out in public.
It doesn't have to be smoke.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, that was gonna be mine too.
It doesn't have to be smoke. But something that you said about the young players coming into the league, the first step needs to be the leagues need to take away this stigma. It's like a parent hiding things from you. Okay,
Absolutely.
that they don't want you to do for whatever reason they don't want you to do it. Mm-hmm. When these young players come into the league, you should be training them on brain health.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The other thing that's interesting about this, like listening to a couple things I saw on YouTube, the medicinal purposes of marijuana helps to mitigate the other drugs that could affect you negatively, right? So it helps you rest, right? It helps with the pain. You don't want to get stuck on opioids and taking Ambien all the time. Like one of the players was talking about, they give them Ambien on the flights to the games and so forth. And he's like, I don't want that because I'm going to get hooked on it. And so you provide them with a safer option, and it probably has less long-term effect. But the main thing is the brain injury thing that is good for. But the thing I wanted to ask you, and I think Jason wanted to ask too, have you had a chance to look at the types or the forms that marijuana comes in, like the different, besides smoking, how is their impact on brain health, and which one seems to be one of the better options?
Yeah.
Absolutely. What I would say is that the method of delivery, once again, one of the marijuana is that it crosses the blood-brain barrier, meaning that there are a lot of medications that we cannot use in the brain to get to your brain to help it. The Lord has designed weed such that it actually brain barrier easily, and so your therapeutic onset is around 3 minutes. Now, it doesn't matter if you use a vaporizer or smoke it, it will still start to affect your brain in 5 minutes. These vape pen, these little vape pens that everybody walks around with, they can have a vape pen on the sideline with HC cannabinoids in it, and as soon as this person gets, they take a few hits from the vape pen, they go get their breath, and boom, they have the best potential for brain health that we could have.
Okay.
Or other preparations take a little bit longer. So, you're talking about hour half of onset, but what happens is I have designed a thing that I think would be beneficial for these players, both acutely and then kind of a tape in the event that you don't want to continue to use cannabinoids. And so in the acute setting, I would give them something that was very fast, like a vaporizer pen. And then after that, they could use that edibles for a couple of weeks until they've been out of the window of that concussion for a few weeks. Then they could stop because marijuana is non-habit forming. It doesn't harm your brain, and it shortly, or if you use it chronically, it's not going to have long-term effects that are negative on your brain. You're going to have, and so I would use a vape pen on the sideline, and then go using edible. Have these players do their regular rehabbing and go back to playing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ignorance when it comes to marijuana, because it's just something like I know from when I was younger. Number one, we couldn't smoke at my house, right? So then if you talk about marijuana, it's like, oh, that's smoking too, and you just forget it. And then you start to hear the different things that are put out there, but it's not good for you.
Right.
And when you really start to look at the effects that it has on the body, and you compare it to what they tell you is okay to take behind the counter and over the counter, it's way better.
Way better.
Way better options. My mom took opioids when she was sick. It shuts your whole system down.
I want to touch on that opioid comment that you made, Joe.
Okay,
just real quickly, because it's really important, considering what we're dealing with now in this country. The opioid crisis is another kind of big deal when it comes to marijuana utilization and with these players, because they get pumped medicines, and marijuana could mitigate that. And that's a big deal, because once you leave the league, addiction to opioid pain medications, and you don't have to have that exposure, and these guys are being against their will in a lot of cases because they don't have any options. So I'm glad you touched on that. I just wanted to comment on.
Right. So Marcellus Wiley had an incident where he was walking to his car and he became ill, and he was literally like stuck. His legs wouldn't work, momentarily paralyzed. They had to come get him. Somebody called the doctor. They said take him to the emergency room immediately. And apparently his kidneys were shutting down due to the use of another drug that the NFL was giving this guy every single week for his career. I believe the drug begins with a T, and he was taking the injections, and that was basically the result of it, kidney failure.
Wow.
Oh, man.
So, all right. Anybody else have any questions?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Dr. Roberts, tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I wrote a book called Guide to Weed, and I wrote it at 10. This is kind of the culmination of the research that I did, and I took a. If you pick up the book, you can get it off of Amazon, but it's a very simple rope, and I did that on purpose. A lot of my friends say, well, why didn't you make it more technical? Why didn't you put the data? Because what I wanted to do was write a book that any person could pick up. It's the basic gist of how marijuana works. Not a scientist, not a teacher, here, just a regular Joe on the street. Pick up, a regular Joe, right? Could pick up and read about it and know exactly what marijuana is, how it works, and how safe it is. And so I wrote the book. It's called Guide to Weed. It's just a little simple. It's like $5. I wanted everyone. My goal was to get it all over the world, and hopefully have more people, yes, and their brain health be better. Because to be honest, the more people who use marijuana, less neurological disease burden we're going to have. And so I just kind of want to make a real manual that could tell people how marijuana works and remove the stigma you mentioned. And it's called Guide to Weed. It's very simple.
Okay, sounds good. I'm definitely going to go get that book to check it out, because it sounds like your approach is spot on. This obviously is a subject that is very close to, as I'll say, it's about to hit the fan in terms of something's going to happen here. Something's going to happen, whether it be the mass legalization around the country, or the expansion of medical marijuana as a alternative to other drugs. Obviously, the leagues know about it and are waiting for an opportune time. So I would like to be able to bring you back on. It could be based on our invite, meaning something's happening and we want to talk about it, or if you see something that you feel like you want to bring to us, we would love to have you back on, because I feel like this is a subject that's going to require us to have 2 or 3 more conversations.
And he talks sports too. Jamar talks sports, so he'll come off.
I do.
Okay. All right. Great.
I would love to, guys, anytime. God bless. Thank you for having me on.
All right, thank you. Dr. Jomar Roberts, ladies and gentlemen. Please go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever else you might get books, and look for this one. It is the Guide to Weed. Very good for anyone to have, obviously. If you have children and you want to know what's going on, that's a good resource for you. And again, this is not a quack by any means. This is a board-certified neurologist who has put in the research and is bringing to us the results of that research. So definitely support him. Definitely support his work. The book, again, is A Guide to Weed, and he is Dr. Jomar Roberts.
Yeah, and another thing, if you have looked at anything on YouTube or looked online, you can see the specific benefits to things like epilepsy, cancer treatment. Like, there's a benefit for it. So it's a big deal, and I think it's the next wave, which everybody kind of knows but doesn't want to admit.
Right, but to know, yeah, you know it's the next wave recreationally.
Right.
Okay, but in terms of for this specific issue, I have not heard much about it, and now to hear that smoking marijuana could prevent
Yeah.
brain injuries,
Yeah.
like not even smoking, but taking or using marijuana in any form can prevent brain injuries, sounds to me like this is what the NFL should be giving
Yep.
to players.
Helps with PTSD.
Day one.
Helps all that stuff.
Right.
And everything that's connected to brain injury.
Right.
So that's a big deal.
Incredibly interesting, and we went